Right now, Iowa is a leader. We're a leader in kind of a dubious distinction in that we and Missouri are tied for most anti-LGBTQ legislation in the nation at the moment, with 14 anti-LGBTQ bills filed in the Iowa legislature. RFRA has two bills, SF 508 and HF 528 in the Iowa legislature. SF 508, as Connie mentioned, has already moved out of subcommittee. It is slated for a committee meeting this week. RFRA, as originally it was envisioned, was a shield to protect minority religious beliefs from government intrusion, right? The reason that everyone has basically turned against it, in terms of folks like ACLU and folks that may have voted for it back in 1990, is that instead of a shield to protect minority religious beliefs, it's really started to be used as a sword to kind of hack away at anti-discrimination protections and a number of other things for dominant religious groups. And so even though the law as it was written initially, everyone kind of supported it, the way it has been interpreted by the courts has kind of changed very dramatically from its initial intent. And you'll see, for instance, on the federal level, things like the Do No Harm Act, which recognizes, yes, we do need to protect minority religious views in certain capacities from that government intrusion, but dominant religion should not be used as an excuse to justify that kind of discrimination. We also have HF 2148. This prevents teachers from talking about quote-unquote controversial issues in the classroom. I will leave it to your imaginations as to what they consider controversial. HF 2201 discourages teachers from teaching about LGBTQ people and topics in the classroom by requiring disclosure and an allowance for parents to opt out. So anytime you want to talk about, for instance, a current presidential candidate who may happen to be gay, you need to disclose that and send a form home and allow parents to opt out of that for every single discussion that you might have. HF 2202 allows for discrimination against and exclusion of transgender athletes in schools. HF 2130 dramatically expands the definition of the term bona fide religious purpose in the Iowa Civil Rights Act to mean practically anything, and that allows for discrimination by religious institutions in virtually any way, whether they're running a food bank or a homeless shelter or hosting a voting location at a church. They would be allowed to discriminate in a number of different ways that they're currently not allowed to do. SF 2130 forces Iowans to disclose their sexual orientation on their marriage licenses for the purpose of denying them child custody later on if they quote-unquote fraudulently conceal their sexual orientation in any way, shape, or form. There's no other purpose to having that information, by the way. Literally the only purpose under that bill is to deny people custody of their children. SF 2193, SF 2194, and HF 2273, all kind of the same general idea. These are license to discharge bills, essentially. So they allow for discrimination against LGBTQ people in employment, housing, adoption, foster care, certain forms of medical care, while obtaining marriage licenses, you name it. They've explicitly kind of outlined all the different ways that they would like to discriminate against LGBTQ people in those particular pieces of legislation. HF 2274 creates a committee to study whether or not transgender people deserve the protections that they currently have in the Iowa Civil Rights Act. HF 2164 removes transgender Iowans from the Iowa Civil Rights Act completely, just kind of removing any pretense there from that study committee. SF 2213 would create a Class B felony for medical providers who provide medically necessary transition care to transgender youth. That means 25 years in prison, in layman terms, for providing best practice medical care which is indicated as medically necessary. That is offensive. HF 2272, that's the same thing as the last bill I just talked about, but in addition, it also provides for the protection of and promotion of conversion therapists here in Iowa. So kind of the opposite direction of how we would like to go with banning that horrible, torturous treatment known as conversion therapy.